Professor Scott Horton. How you doing tonight? I can't hear you. There we go.
That's because I didn't hit the button. I'm doing great. How are you? Nice jacket.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
You know, do you think if I joined your skateboard group in this jacket, it would be okay?
Yeah. Depending on your skills, man, that's really all that counts, you know.
So there's no discrimination against a person based on their jackets?
It would depend on the circumstances. In my crew, you'd be welcome. Absolutely. I can't really vouch for all skaters everywhere, but yeah.
I don't know.
Hey, how are you, man?
Everything's good. You know, everything's good. It's been an exciting kind of time since we last met, and there's a lot of things I just want to talk to you about.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff.
Yeah, but let me. I've got a live link here to this YouTube page, and I'm just gonna share this out there a little bit.
Okay.
So if you just give me a quick second, let's see if we can get some folks to join us here real fast. All right. And I know. Oh, well, I could even tag you. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Do we have an audience? I don't know if I could see where they were if we had one. Is it the Q&A tab? Is that the right tab?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of different places to watch it. You know, this whole Google Hangout thing has become so ridiculously sophisticated now. So there's an embed at Liberty.me right now.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually watch it on Liberty.me and chat at Liberty.me. So if you go to that link, then you can see what people are saying. You know.
Oh, I see it right here. Yeah, yes. As long as I don't hit play on the.
Right.
As long as I don't hit play on the player.
You can see you can see all the nasty things everybody's saying about you, and see all the.
Hi guys, I can see you.
All the praise they're heaping on my insights.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Oh, here, I can just retweet you. I don't have to bother. I was going to tweet it out myself, but you made it easy on me. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Eye on the Empire. That's the name of the show.
It's a good name, and it's named in honor of our dear friend
Alan Bach.
Alan Bach, yeah, who died some years ago.
Orange County Register.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, and antiwar.com.
Back in the analog days when people read newspapers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He was one of the best out there.
So what do you think, Jeff? Viva la Revolution or what?
Like now? Of course, I'm always Viva la Revolution. But you mean about Baltimore, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
so I want to talk to you about this because I think that we've got some really good, this is an interesting show, right? Because we talk about, because my I love foreign policy, but it's not really my thing, right? Like I don't study it, so I outsource that to you. I mostly think about domestic issues, right? But here in Baltimore, I think what we're seeing is like this weird cross section of the two. We're seeing the same tactics that were used in Baghdad, now being used in Baltimore, right? I mean, so you've got escalation in both cases. It's always the style of the state: escalate, 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 never back down. And I don't mean just in terms of military tactics. I mean in policy, the social planning and social construction and intervention and fascistic style policies and state management of the social order in Baltimore stretches back, you can't believe it, not 30 years, not 50 years, but 100 years. This was like Baltimore was the first sort of place that the federal government undertook the project of nation building, basically, within our borders. And it began with very severe racial zoning and severe segregation laws that were implemented basically at the turn of the 20th century. And that was sort of the original sin. And that led to a massive, housing shortage and, a very disgruntled population of African Americans. and which drove the political demand for public housing. Then of course you had the New Deal style projects, and you had the development of the the welfare state, and everything sort of follows from that. Then the ramping up of the drug war, which has been catastrophic. Then the building of the prison state, and then more recently the militarization of the cops, and finally everything just kind of blows up. It's not the first time it's blown up, right? But it's probably in some ways the worst time. But I thought that there's a very interesting analogy here between what's happening in Baltimore and what's happened with U.S. foreign policy around the world. This direct relationship between U.S. policy and the terrible consequences for the people that have to live under it and suffer under it, whether it's domestically or foreign. Do you think that that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, more than anything, of course, there's the economic consequences. You have the boom and the bust from all the inflation, which is basically a conspiracy to make the wars seem free. And then plus you just have the artificially low interest rate. So never mind the boom and the bust. Anybody who doesn't have good credit at the Chase is basically outlawed from saving. So you have no kind of anybody who's poor but is trying to save and get ahead and provide has a real tough time of it. The only way that you can really get ahead is by taking out a loan. The only way to go into business for yourself. And then, of course, I know if Sheldon Richman was here, he would talk all about all the fines and the fees and the regulations and how, you just you can't even open a barbecue stand without an accountant and a lawyer and $10,000 and 10,000 hoops you got to jump through, and all these barriers and all these things.
Yeah, not to mention, I think one of the worst single interventions in the economy today is child labor laws. I mean, so you're basically making it illegal for anybody to be valued by the market in any kind of remunerative way until the age of like 16, 17, 18 really is a realistic age when you can actually actually it's legal to get a job in this country, I mean, you talk about destroying economic opportunity, but the point is, it's not just one policy. It's a conspiracy of all these policies put together. And we've talked for years, and libertarians and conservatives have talked for years about the bad consequences that come from socialist style interventions in the market. Well, here it is. We're presented with it right now and full view. And it strikes me as strange that people are typically, the bourgeoisie is typically unwilling to consider these sort of the deeper roots of this, and how it's all, neither the left nor the right considers this, right? I mean, the left looks at it and says, escalate more, we need more welfare, more school reform, more left-wing, nonsense policies emanating from Obama. And then the right wing looks at it and says, lock up the animals, unleash the cops, crack some more skulls, escalate. And neither side is considering this relationship between 100 years of state planning in this poor city, and what we're seeing today.
Yeah, so for the audience, the article here is Baltimore, a Legacy of Failed State Experiments by Jeff Tucker at the Foundation for Economic Education. And the way you say it in here is that with every failure of socialism, we get more fascism, kind of a thing, as this guy's project doesn't work and that one doesn't work. Well,
it's disgusting too, because, you can read so much commentary about this, and people just miss these issues. I mean, you read the left and they're like, well, this is why we need more wealth redistribution, and then you read the right.
He said about the Waco hearings, he said about the Republicans and the Democrats, but it's applicable all over the place. He said, it's like watching drunks fight in a bar. They swing and they miss. And so, you have just all hot air all the way around, a bunch of fake arguments, and all us libertarians just with our heads hanging. Just nobody understands. Don't you have to abolish all the zoning laws? You have to make it legal for people to have a little business in their living room. Why is that a crime? How could anybody call us a free country if you can't just run a little business out of your garage and maybe try to build it up from there? Huh? Anybody think about that? But no, You need, I mean, hell, in order to do just my little business that I do, my little kind of freelance radio show, I'm in the black market, man. I'm skirting every regulation in the whole wide world to be able to do this.
Well, almost
to be able to actually do what I'm doing would require a level of capital that I can't raise.
Yeah. Well, this is what people don't talk about. I mean, everybody's a criminal today. And, the idea that, you think about it in Baltimore, law breaking is a way of life. I mean, drugs, markets, gangs are absolutely everywhere. The idea that there's any respect whatsoever for any law is essentially preposterous. I mean, this is what the U.S. calls a failed state in foreign policy. Am I right? Isn't that the very definition of a failed state? Where
if it was anybody else, yeah, absolutely. If it was anybody our government was after, no doubt about it. Yeah. Hey, by the way, I'm glad you brought up the gangs, because I think this is a real important anecdote just by itself, but it's also illustrative of how this works. There's a guy named Sean King at the Daily Coast blog, the Democrats. And his name's Sean King, Shaun. And he's got this great clip that he found off of the local news there in Baltimore. You might remember, I guess, the night of the riots when they first broke out, and the next day, the cops were saying, oh, we have a credible threat. Well, they're lying when they outright label it credible in the first place. We have a credible threat that all the gangs in Baltimore, all the black gangs, are all joining forces into an army of cop killers, and they're coming to kill us all. And then they say it's the Bloods and the Crips, and get prepared to be really afraid, the Black Guerrilla family. They're all coming together with all of their guns to form a giant single super predator with the only goal of killing every cop in Maryland. Run for the hills, Ma. And then the next, and I was watching this coming over on TV all day, I guess on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day it was. And then by that evening, the report was coming across that in Los Angeles, which is 3,000 miles away, every cop on the LAPD was being ordered you have to ride buddy system. Nobody out there alone. Every cop has to have a partner with them out there on the street, because we got word that the Bloods and the Crips and the Black Guerrilla family, they're all joining forces into a giant army of every black gang in America to kill all cops. And what's funny is, I mean, I guess there's a certain number of housewives who would buy this, because why not? They don't know any reason why not, or that kind of thing. But it occurred to me when I was hearing this that pretty much the only people who would believe this would be cops, right? Like anyone else in America would just know that is just not right. I mean, give me a break. What are you talking about? Well, then, so this is where we get back to Sean King, is he's got this blog where they went and interviewed the Crips and the Bloods. And there they are in all their blue and red flags and everything else. And they joined forces, all right. They were trying to stop the riots. They were going out there. They were the law and order. They're the black market security service in that community, where the government is only your enemy and does not protect you. They're the black market protection racket. And so they're out there saying, hey, kids, go home. They're the Bloods and the Crips. They're the law and order. And all that the government can do is spin this giant, I mean, this completely stupid conspiracy theory, right? I mean, this is the level of like John Birch in 1955. Like, they're going to get us. Oh, they're going to get us, right? I mean, give me a break. But this lasted at least a couple of days and made it to at least the West Coast. I don't know how many police departments in between Baltimore and LA bought into this thing. But they actually, changed policy in LA and started riding all cops must have a partner style for, went on DEFCON 2 or whatever it is over this.
Yeah, that is so
crazy thing.
That is so believable. And yet, that these gangs do serve a kind of market function. And probably it is, as you say, mostly about security and some level of social organization and socialization, and I mean, there's a real function that the gangs perform. They probably have picked up where the state has failed.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a really good interview too. It's really worth taking a look at, where this local news lady from NBC 11 in Baltimore went and interviewed these guys, and they had a lot to say about, she asked him, well, what's the one thing above all that you would want people to know? And he said, don't believe you, lady. Don't believe the media and what
really
you
great.
say about us, because it's not right. There's the truth, and then there's what you guys say.
Did you ever watch The Wire, Scott, at all?
Oh yeah.
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 Okay.
I don't have HBO, but I got it off the Pirate Bay.
Okay, so you watched like all the seasons? Because I didn't watch all the seasons, but I mean,
yeah, I think I pretty much watched all of it.
Okay,
I don't know about it.
I mean, doesn't it strike you as amazing that all this would happen in Baltimore? You're like, this is right after this series. I mean, it's probably the most socially significant sort of television documentary style miniseries in modern American life, and that it would be so beautifully descriptive of exactly what we've seen, like on the nightly news breaking out in Baltimore. Don't you think that's incredible?
Right. Well, and the thing is, I mean, it's all over the place, but yeah, that's the one where they made the show and brought it right into everybody's living room, the policies they support, what it really means to the people there. And it's funny, man, for a few different reasons. There's this interview with David Simon, the guy that wrote that. And as you may know, he was a newspaper reporter on the police beat there in Baltimore for 20 years or something before he started writing that show and got into that. And so boy, does he have a lot to say. There's this interview of him that just goes on and on. It's kind of ridiculous, actually.
Oh, he never shuts up. And he's something of a kind of a left liberal.
Well, that's the thing, is he actually does a great job of explaining exactly how, especially the drug war. I mean, he doesn't get into every ridiculous social policy, but he goes into how the drug war is just destroyed. He really explains it well, and he pins it virtually all on this guy O'Malley, who's now the governor, who was the mayor, and who, it reminds me of The Wire, that maybe the character of the up and coming politician in The Wire is actually based on this guy O'Malley, and all his good intentions, and then all the compromises he makes in order to move up a rung for his own self, and all the rationalizations that, well, once I have more power, then I can do more and better to help, and all this kind of thing. And now they're saying he might challenge Hillary Clinton for the Democrat nomination. This guy O'Malley.
That would be great. One
more thing though is just how he explains how what this guy did in order to ramp up his numbers was he just unleashed the cops to just do like sweeps in Fallujah in 2006 or whatever, just round up every fighting age male that you can find and then some, and just arrest everybody all the time. A lot of times there wouldn't even be charges, but all they needed was the arrest, so they could have it on paper. And then if anybody had any serious crimes that they would try to report, they would say, nah, if you want to report a robbery, we're going to run you for warrants first, and all this kind of thing, and try to dissuade anyone from reporting any serious crimes and all this. So they basically forbid the cops from doing any real police work at all, and set them to just prey on the entire poor, black, politically powerless population of that city, and just unleashed them, and then kept it that way for years. And if you thought that the poor black people of Baltimore were alienated from the cops under Ronald Reagan or whatever,
right?
You know what I mean? It just doesn't compare to what they've done just in the last, I guess, decade, 15 years or whatever, in just going to war against them.
And what's striking to me, I don't know how much of David Simon's interviews you watched, but there are two other interviews that are worth watching. The first one is with Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, and so David Simon, of course, that show, The Wire, was beloved by lovers of liberty, right? It was showing the failure of the public school, the prison system, the drug war. I mean, it's just a great case study in the failure of central planning all around, where the roles are turned, right? The gangs are emerge basically as the civilizing good guys, and the official structures of government are the bad guys, where the true corruption is, right? Mm-hmm. So, but David Simon was very resentful in a way about how much libertarians like that show, and so he's like, in this whole interview with Gillespie, he's fighting him, like at every step, and saying, libertarians don't have any good answers for this, and it's sort of what you expect from the left liberals. They can sometimes be very good at discovering the problems, but then you propose like normal human liberty as a solution, and they're like, oh no, we can't have that. So very contentious interview there where Simon's, just basically unwilling to come to terms with the implications of all the problems he's so beautifully documented. And the second interview is just, to me, just an incredible thing. And I wrote about it, but Obama interviewed Simon. I don't know if you watched that.
Actually, I didn't, but I read your article about it, though.
Yeah, so it's really freaky, right? So first of all, Obama never shuts up in this interview, and it's extremely annoying, But so there's that problem. Like, he's just running at the mouth all the time. And the second thing is that, like, Simon, I guess because he's being interviewed by the president of the United States, is not quite like comfortable, right? So he's pulling back a little bit on some of his rhetoric, and really moderate in his criticisms of the drug war, but he does sort of draw attention to some of the problems. And then and Obama's very strange in the course of this interview, because while you're watching, it's easy to forget he's the president who's actually like backing all these policies, and ultimately responsible for carrying them out. But he goes overboard and basically trying to distance himself from the drug war and from the prison state and the criminalization of everything, and he sort of presents himself as this impresario of a national conversation in which we try to develop alternative ways of dealing with the problem.
Yeah, that was what Eric Holder did too when he was leaving office last week. Like his farewell address was, "We've just got too many people in prison." It's like, what, on his last day as Attorney General? Thanks for nothing.
Did he say that, really?
Yeah. So they're all the same way. It's just like Ike, right? His farewell address. Boy, oh boy, have I left you guys in a lurch. See ya, I'm going golfing.
Look out for the military-industrial complex that I put together and lorded over the last 4 years. Exactly.
Yeah, these guys. Yeah, no, and Obama, of course, he's the best at the pretended lack of self-awareness.
He's
like,
amazing.
He doesn't know that he's the chief executive around here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he comes across like, I don't know, like a tenured professor at Princeton, and just in touch with pop culture and compassionate towards the youth and seeking out enlightened solutions and this kind of crap, But and it's easy to see it, to me, as a cynical political move, which it certainly is. And yet, I can't help but think it's somewhat significant, that the president of the United States, is ready, in a kind of a YouTube interview like that to send out the signal that is open to some kind of decriminalization, and doing something about the racially based punitive policing tactics and that sort of thing. I mean, I think that's significant. I mean, to me, it suggests that we're living through a big shift in thinking on these subjects. At least I hope so.
Yeah, well, some kind of change is going to come. I mean, they're up against, and we talked about this before, they're up against the real problem of everyone having a high quality video camera in their pocket and access to Facebook and YouTube, where just regular nobodies, I mean, you don't even have to be a political activist. You can be nobody, and I don't mean nobody in a bad way, but I just mean someone who's just a normal person who doesn't even have a political life at all, can upload a video of, look what I saw, and blam, it's national news, and there's nothing that the establishment can do to stop that. It's just on now. The technology's there. And so, 2 weeks ago when we talked about Walter Scott, who the cops shot in the back, and the video went viral.
That's right. That's right. We did talk about that.
And in 2 weeks when we talked, there will be a few more of these already.
Yeah.
There was
and then there was Freddie Gray
in LA that they killed yesterday, who was crying for his mommy as he died, and it was all, oops, I thought he was reaching for something. I don't know.
So this is on YouTube. Yeah, another viral video of a
no, well, this guy I don't think is on. I don't think there's a viral video for this one, but the reporting was that it was just another innocent guy that got killed. And the cops knew he was an innocent, that it was an innocent guy and a mistake on the scene. but then they still wouldn't let his mom go with him to the hospital in the ambulance because they got to pretend like they, you know, are going along with their story here that they were afraid or whatever. Yeah. And so he ended up dying alone, of course, this guy who was doing nothing. He's just some guy. But anyway, so the point is this is going to keep happening and keep happening. Yeah. And so politically, they have to do something. Even Hillary Clinton now is, you know, on the face of it, denouncing Bill Clinton's crime bill and that entire, you know, tough on crime policy. She did a speech at Columbia saying this kind of thing.
Now, I did. You know, I didn't see the speech, but now that you mentioned it, I remember the headline. That was just a couple of days ago, right?
So I want to ask you about this because I know obviously my easy answer is we'll just abolish the state. You know, what the hell do we need a government for it all anyway?
That's my answer too, Scott.
Yeah, of course. I know that's your answer too. But then I think, okay, half measures, right? Like, what if we could get the ear of all of the 2015 generation of Black civil rights activists in this country to listen to us? We live in these 50 states. There's nothing we can do about this. What do we do to actually, and we can get back to the economic stuff, but just where the real razor's edge is, where the cops meet the civilians of American towns and cities. Yeah. What is it that we can do? I mean, I kind of have a couple ideas, but I wonder what you think.
No, I mean, we both know the incremental steps in the right direction, right? The very first thing is the decriminalization of pot possession and distribution. I mean, that's like, I don't know, more than half or something, you know, of the problem. We could just get rid of that. That would be a huge step. And then we're already taking that step, right? I mean, that's inevitable. The war on pot is in effect, you know, over. It's just kind of spreading. It's what are we looking at? 12 to 18 months before it's, you know, basically de facto legal all over the country. That's going to make a huge difference. But the other thing is that it's exactly what Obama said to David Simon. These punitive criminal, you know, the imprisonments for nonviolent offenses they just have to stop. And by nonviolent, I mean truly anything that's nonviolent should not involve jails and police. I mean, that's so. I think.
What about somebody who swindles $100 million?
Well, that's usually, you know, I mean, a lot of that are settled as torts. I mean, and plus that is violence. You know, I mean, if you're swindling $100 million, that's, you know, basically stealing money.
Fraud can count then.
Yeah, look,
victimless, you know, crimes, or how do you define that?
Okay, so I will not, under any circumstances, recommend jail for anybody, and I go, you know, I'd say that for serial killers too. I'm so against government prisons. I just don't think there's any justice that comes out of them, and I would just love to push a button and just abolish them completely and see what the markets would come up with in terms of dealing with actual criminality. But that's not the problem we're dealing with here. I mean, the problem we're dealing with is that, you know, half the prison population, or if not 2/3, probably shouldn't even be there. I mean, this is preposterous.
Well, and a lot of the violence is coming from the fighting over control of the black markets anyway. So,
well, it is, and there's also, you know, I mean, have you ever hung out at the local county courthouse and looked at the kind of nonsense that they prosecute day in and day out? I mean, it's just disgraceful. I mean, I've sat there for day after day, you know, doing idiotic things like trying to fight a traffic ticket or some dumb thing like that, and been appalled at the abuse that people face for the slightest little things. You know, stealing a ham sandwich from Walmart. You know, and next thing you know, the judge is taking away the driver's license. You know, is fining them, you know, $5,000, and you know, they get it wrapped up in these systems. And once the state has you within their machinery, like, they don't let you go. I mean, basically, they just set out to destroy your life until you just turn to real crime, and then that's it. You know, right. So
well, once you got a felony, you can't get a job.
I mean, yeah, that's right. But you know, I can
market labor right away.
My sense, and it's true, this is biased by my own experience, right? But I've sat in these county courthouses and watched this nonsense day in and day out. My sense that there wasn't a single person in the system who deserved to be there. I mean, I think that there are other ways of dealing with these things besides these punitive tactics we're using. It's like, it's like the system creates the criminality, you know. And if it were up to me, I would just scrap the whole thing. I mean, I would sit there and have fantasies of taking a big cinder block, throwing it through the glass in the back of the room, and telling everybody to run. You know, just get out now. You know?
Well, you know, I know people who've been in prison and who'd be the first to say that some people belong in prison. There are some people who are, man, they are going to terribly violate somebody's rights soon or whatever. But then when I argued with him about it a little bit, this one guy I'm thinking of, he had to admit that it's few enough that, yeah, the market could handle it.
I think it's true.
The vast majority of the people in there are in there for things that could easily be solved in other ways. You know, the people who are truly dangerous to the rest of us are such a small fraction. It's,
and you know,
you know how
and when you talk to people on the left about this, and this goes for David Simon too, who by the way, in his interview with Nick Gillespie, blamed the libertarians for this problem. And you know why?
The privatizing of the prisons.
Exactly.
Well, see, this is on my list of things I wanted to ask you about, because I have a whole thing about this where we have two entirely different concepts that are called privatization. And a lot of times libertarians make this mistake too, particularly the, you know, better paid Washington, D.C. think tanky ones. And they don't differentiate between government stopping doing something and letting the market provide that service by whatever means, versus the government abolishing an agency, but then just hiring a private company on a government contract to carry out the same basic service. So there's anarcho-capitalism where if there's a prison, it's a free market prison. It's not on a government contract here. But so what we have then is kind of the worst of both worlds, where you have all of the force of the state combined with the
efficiency of the market.
This prison full of people, whereas presumably the local court officers aren't getting a bonus for just, you know, seeing more people sent off to prison, but the prison company, they sure have an incentive to, there's a new report about this in a Washington Post story about it actually, where they are just, and you would predict this, but maybe the average person might not predict this, the absolute shamelessness that the private prison corporations, the shamelessness with which they lobby for stiffer penalties for people breaking criminal laws. I mean, the appearance of impropriety of their conflict of interest ain't got a damn thing to do with it. I mean, if it was up to them, they would outlaw every breath you take, because that's incredible. That's their incentive. That's, simple as that. Somebody else has to push back. Their shame ain't gonna, you know, restrain them.
It's so offensive and so disgusting, and it offends, I think, us in particular as libertarians to see, the corruption of the beauty of the market, you know, put in service of the prison state is so egregious. However, I do think that libertarians have been slow to kind of like recognize this. I remember, Scott, in the 1980s, there was a lot of talk about privatization of prison services, you know, and I don't recall, I mean, I'm talking about the late 80s, maybe something like that, maybe early 90s, something like that, but I don't recall like having a visceral sense that there was a mistake happening here, you know. It's like, I remember thinking, well, yeah, you gotta have prisons, it's probably better that they're private than public, you know. And some very good economists were behind it, and you know, I just, like, my antenna wasn't quite up for it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, now all these years later, it's mortifying. And yeah, you're exactly right. We need to like get with the program and realize, you know, we don't want to be privatizing evil. You know, we want to be abolishing evil. And
and we need a different term. I mean, there's got to be a different term for privatizing services where the government just stops doing something and let the market take care of it, versus a government contract. I mean, it's an entirely different concept. Yeah,
and I feel a little this way about schools in a way too, because there's a big push on for school choice and school reform and charter schools and all these kind of alternatives. And, in some ways, I think it's true that all these systems will improve the educational system. I have no doubt about it. And that desperately needs to be done. And it's wrong to ignore it, because unlike jail, education is actually like necessary, right? Mm-hmm. And yet I think you're right. I mean, the kind of reform you really want is one where the government just steps away, right?
Yeah, in fact, there's already plenty of history of this. It's not exactly my expertise, but I know that there's a corporation called Edison that went around and basically got government contracts. I'm going back probably 15 years now.
Yeah, no, I remember this. Yeah.
And they failed. I mean, basically, they came to administer government schools. They took them over, and it became, instead of a red school, it became a brown school, right? Fascism instead of socialism. But it wasn't a market enterprise where, hey, parents, sign your kids up today for Edison brand schools if you think that we're really good. And so it ended up still these, it's basically the exact same thing as a government education, only now a few people are making an extra buck off it. But other than that, nothing really changed, which is an entirely different concept than just If I Dream a Genie would just abolish all the government schools and we would just have people come together in the market to create new ones that'll fit people's needs. I mean, simple as that.
And the danger is that libertarians get the blame. I mean, it really hurts very much when somebody as intelligent as David Simon is blaming, I mean, of all things, libertarians for the rise of the prison state. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing. And Gillespie was shocked, right? I mean, he was unprepared for this, for this level of critique. And he was like, wait, no, I'm not for that. And libertarians haven't been for it. Actually, that's not quite correct. With libertarians, I think, as you say, more the establishment oriented ones, but we're mostly behind that change in policy. And what is your assessment of this? I mean, neither of us are quite experts on this topic, but how much do you think that, this privatization of prisons actually did contribute to the rise of the police state in America?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it'd be really hard to gauge because there are a lot of other factors going on at the same time. But I'm sure that it's a very important thing, a very important part of it. I'm sorry, we may be recovering old ground again with this one too. I forgot if it was with you that we talked about the lobbyists for Honeywell and the other hydrogen bomb manufacturers.
Yeah.
Where these guys' job is killing all of humanity or making devices with which you could, bring on the next ice age or whatever, or wipe out billions of people. And their attitude is, man, we got to get rid of these things. So, we got a meeting coming up with Senator who's at staff, and we're going to do everything we can we're going to buy him the fattest steak that we can. And we're going to try to convince him to buy more H-bombs from us. And the national policy of how many H-bombs do we need and should we use them on other people and these kinds of things, that's somebody else's job. They're not worried about that. They're just lobbying to sell as many hydrogen bombs as they can, and somebody else in the democracy better figure out how to stop them. And it's the same kind of thing with the prisons. I guess I don't have a bunch of facts behind this, but Anheuser-Busch and all the alcohol cartel, which alcohol is a total fascist industry in this country. You wonder why there's 6 major brands of beer when you got 150 million passionate beer drinkers who all have their own ideas about how beer should be, right? But we got 6 brands to choose from. It's a totally fascist industry, always has been. That's why John McCain is so rich, because he married into beer fascism in Arizona. But these guys, I've known this since I was in high school or whatever, is when I first got the taste of this, that they lobby for the drug war as much as they can. Absolutely. And there's nothing that terrifies a beer salesman more than the legalization of pot. And so they work hard to prevent it.
Yeah.
And so, it's got to be a big part,
What you're pointing to is something that we can't, emphasize enough. And it's something I have to always I feel like I'm always having to relearn in some way. And I think part of the problem is that I love private enterprise. I love business. I'm impressed by the miracles of the market. Every day, I'm consumed by this. And so I tend to be a little bit slow to recognize this weird symbiotic relationship between between an industry cartel and the state that really does make up a kind of a ruling class that leads to the loss of our freedom. And if you don't mind, can I just quickly give you a latest example, which is a little bit off topic, but I got interested in this esse of the light bulb bans. And you probably already know what I'm going to say, but a couple of weeks ago, I reread Atlas, or I read Anthem, by Rand, and talked about it on a Liberty.me a Sunday night seminar. And then I was struck by the irony that the very innovation that this book celebrates and for which the guy is persecuted for rediscovering is in our own time being taken away from us by force, namely incandescent bulbs. And they're very difficult to get. Every year they're more difficult to get, and the bulb manufacturers are making new things like these compact fluorescents and very expensive halogen bulbs and LED and all these things. But the old-fashioned incandescent bulb is being phased out by force. Not by market forces, but like raw coercion. And I wrote an article complaining about this, and I just took it as axiomatic that this was because of, environmentalists having basically made a mistake to think that these things are somehow inefficient, together with kind of meddling bureaucrats and those combinations too. So a day or two went by after I published that article, and I began to look at it more and more. And I guess the conclusion I'm about to come to. The more I looked at it, the more I realized that it wasn't the environmentalists, and it wasn't like the bureaucracies. This was entirely the light bulb industry itself that brought about this ban. And they were the ones who lobbied for it. They're the ones who paid off all the politicians and gave to all the campaigns, pushed for the import restrictions. And it's all on the record. I mean, they're like testifying in front of the Senate. The National Electrical Manufacturers Association was the top lobbyist to get the incandescent bulb banned. And so I felt like a little bit of an idiot here, right? Like here I'm blaming the poor environmentalists. It was entirely a corporate, fascist racket.
Right. Although I'm sure there are plenty of environmentalists who fell for it and got in on it anyway. Yeah. Hey, look, a regulation. Yay. They just assume it's good,
But isn't it funny? It's like even though I understand this intellectually, it always takes me a little bit of an extra step and an effort to recognize this evil, corrupt relationship between business and government. Which
this is what made me a libertarian in the first place when I was in high school, was understanding that this giant left-right war over who do we like better, corporate power or state power, basically, to kind of dumb it down, was a big fake argument. And that, of course, big business loves big government. What would big business be without big government? Small business. Give me a break.
Yeah, right? Probably that's right. That's an empirical question.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, they're on welfare one way or the other. They're using eminent domain to steal land. They're regulating, lobbying for regulations that hurt their competition.
Yeah, and look, I could deal with local bond deals to help out the later, Home Depot or even eminent domain with Walmart. I don't like it, but what really I find just outrageously offensive is where these corporations aggressively, they pay off the politicians, and then they go to Washington and they call in the favors. And then the politicians write up legislation urging the bureaucracies to carry out their wishes that really amount to violating our rights. Or, I mean, look, okay, the end of the incandescent bulb is okay, that's not the doom of civilization. But yeah, I mean, hasn't it been true for the better part of a century that big business has been the primary lobbyist behind the American warfare state too?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, back to Nick Gillespie in Baltimore, he wrote a piece all about, as you mentioned in your piece at Fee, about urban renewal there. And he talks about how the government has redone the waterfront, over and over. And that's part of that show, The Wire. You see all the union lobbying and all that for the government money to redo the waterfront, and how basically they're just taxing all the poorest people who get no benefit out of it whatsoever to to build all this stuff. And he even talks about how, like, there's this last former chromium factory is this, the last real sweet piece of property on the waterfront. And oh boy, all the developers want to develop it. Oh, they want to develop it so bad, but no, they don't want to develop it bad enough that they would use their own investors' money to develop the property. They are going to get the people of Baltimore who don't get any benefit out of it are going to pay their way to, redo the property. They're just waiting on one more environmental sample or whatever. And they're going to blow another $50 jillion, rebuilding this thing. And it's all in scarce resources with a limited budget for a city government. This is all money that, careful what you wish for and all that, but it could be spent providing the most basic services to the people who need them the most in the country, in the town. Right. One more thing he says in there, Jeff, and this won't surprise you, but it will shock you, and that is that there are tens of thousands of unoccupied buildings in Baltimore City right now. Tens of thousands. I don't know what kind of regulations are keeping people from buying up that property and doing something with it. Somebody can find something to do with it, but somehow they're not able to. And it's just, it is not the market failing there. I know that.
No, and somewhere in something I wrote, I linked to a kind of a 100-year history of real estate in Baltimore. And truly, it all begins with racial segregation. I mean, this was a policy very much like what you expect under, in Red China or something like that, of really taking one population, like moving it and partitioning it off and segregating and separating and excluding and imposing all sorts of restrictions on the commercial marketplace. Builders could not build for Black people in Baltimore, for decades. If you did, it was Black only housing and there was white only housing, and that's the way all the real estate ads read, and it was all a reflection of public policy priorities. So, there's deep sin here, stretched all the way back in history. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned, I just want to mention something else that I just could roll back just a little bit, because I think what you said is like really significant. People look at this Baltimore situation and they go, oh, look at these terrible poor people. They have no respect for law, no discipline. They have no respect for private property and morality. And, maybe that's true. But, the real problem here is the state. And like, the question is, what class of society actually manages the state machinery? I mean, is it really the poor? Not really. If you want to know who's running the system, you have to look at the people with the money and the power, and that's the rich. That's the dominant industries, and that to me is a very interesting way to understand the situation. I mean, to a large extent, when the American bourgeoisie turns on the television and sees all these rioting poor people and they blame them, this is just on the surface. I mean, if you want to understand the real problem, you have to like peel back the surface. And then that's when you get to the ruling class.
Right. Yeah. It's all, obviously, it's all an economic question. In fact, the riots are basically an optical illusion, really. I mean, they're great for TV. They'll play the same, 10-minute clip of CVS burning on a loop all day, over and over and over again. When, as you wrote in your article at Fee there, boy, they'll beat the crap out of you for no reason. But when it comes to an actual civil disturbance, they're nowhere to be seen, right? Like Chief Wiggum says on The Simpsons, we're powerless to help you, not to harm you. Right? And so all that happened with the riot is, it wasn't even, the poor Black people of Baltimore rioting. It wasn't the Freddie Gray murder protesters rioting. It was teenage kids rioting. Yes, because they perceive that, hey, this is finally a cop-free space for the first time in my life, right? They're experiencing a modicum of liberty for the first time in their life. You say they don't respect property. That's because they don't even rent private property. They live in government housing, much less owning their own property. Yeah. And so, we're talking about 16 and 17-year-old boys out there looting Doritos and breaking windows and having a good time, basically running wild. But that's, some very small percentage of the tens of thousands of people of Baltimore who are out there marching and demanding justice for the murder of this guy and the last 100 guys they killed before him, and the rest that they've had to suffer through. I'll tell you, man, I was watching Fox News, and of course they have a black guy out there doing it for them, which just makes it perfect for the Fox News scheme. But they got him out there in the crowd, and he's just yelling at the top of his lungs, "Oh my God, it's a nightmare. You never seen anything like this before," or whatever. And I mean, compared to the LA riot, this was nothing, right? Like, everybody was having a good time during these riots. There's smiles all around. There's not fist fights. Nobody was getting killed. Nobody was getting beaten up. They're looting the CVS, right? Like, this is how bad it got or whatever. But the Fox News guy, "Animals everywhere. They're coming to get us. Lock the gates of your gated communities, everyone 1,000 miles from here, because you're just in so much danger. You have no idea. If a cop came here, surely he'd be killed." And like, you're talking like there's teenage boys running around with bags of Doritos and new pairs of shoes and whatever. Like, what is he talking about? And the whole thing is performance art, basically, for the Fox News audience, for old white people in their golf course adjacent community, gay communities around the country, to be terrified for fun, right? Instead of going to the horror movie on Friday night, let's just stay home and be scared of black people, I guess. It's just anyway. I'm sorry. I had a point there, Jeff, somewhere, but I forgot what the hell it was. Oh, I know what it was. You mentioned China, and I keep reading people say, you know what? Baltimore used to be an ass-kicking town. It was one of the most ass-kicking productive towns on the face of the planet Earth, maybe in all of history. And then, Bush Sr. and Clinton and Bush Jr. and Obama, they sold them all down the river with these free trade agreements. And how are the people of Baltimore supposed to compete with the, Chinese slaves and totalitarian red China over there with their artificially low wages, Jeff?
One way might be to eliminate taxes and labor regulations, that make it illegal for people to work. I mean, or illegal to start businesses. I mean, that might be a start, So, like, all these things play into each other. I don't think it's not like it's one policy, right? I mean, it's like dozens and dozens, if not thousands of policies. It's a paradigm that's just wrong. And the wrong paradigm is the belief that you can run a city like Baltimore better from the center rather than just allowing human liberty, and it's not just city of Baltimore, right? I mean, this is the playground of the planners, the planning elite in Washington. It has been for a century.
Yeah. It's really sad to see. I guess I follow a lot of liberals and conservatives and everybody in between all over on Twitter. And I see so much economic ignorance. And, it's easy to perceive the very richest billionaires as a bunch of rich conservative billionaires. So I must be the opposite of whatever that is. And so people are just kind of by default, there's some kind of communist. And they say, or, that's not polite. You're supposed to call everybody a socialist. But their idea of capitalism is when you work hard and somebody else runs off with all the money and you don't ever get any of it. That's all they know about it. That's all they understand of it.
Sure.
That's all they see of it.
Yeah. I totally get that. In fact, earlier when we were talking about the role of the corporate ruling class in pushing for statist policies like World War I, I thought about this. I mean, this is basically the birth of the American left. American socialism grew out of observing this. The symbiotic relationship between the capitalist elite and the violence of the state. And you see those things come together and destroy the world. Yeah. I mean, people are tempted to go in the direction of believing in sort of a people's revolution, which I believe in a people's revolution too, but just one rooted in private property and having nothing to do with the government. It's just a difference in types of solutions. But the diagnosis of the real source of the problem between what you and I think and what the American communists believed in, say, 1920 is very similar.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at some of their simplest slogans about, the state is the steering committee for the ruling elite, or empire is the final stage of capitalism, these kinds of things. It's certainly the final stage of state capitalism.
I mean, that first slogan, what was the first slogan? That the state is the
the steering committee of the ruling class or something like that, right?
I thought I wrote that for the first time. I thought I created that phrase last week. Okay.
I don't know. You very well might have. Is that where I read that? The one I was trying to think of was the empire as the final stage of capitalism.
Yeah.
I'd definitely buy the final part because, apparently empire is murder, suicide. You can see it, tearing our society apart in every way, like where we started this thing with the militarized cops who are all, your local deputy sheriff as an infantry soldier or worse, a Navy SEAL special forces guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like if you have a state, then the people who are the richest are going to buy it off and they're going to use it for their ends.
I think that is an incredibly important thing to remember and understand when you're looking at things like these Baltimore riots on television, that what you think is the problem is not actually the core of the problem. As you say, this is symptomatic, but if you want to understand the structure of power, not just in the United States, but in all times and all places, most likely, you have to understand it in terms of a ruling class elite that seeks out cartelization, the end of market-based competition, the compromise of authentic liberty and true property rights, and the capture and control of the violent apparatus of the state. Look, I mean, it took me a very long time to realize this, but that I think is the core analytical framework that we need to use to understand things like Baltimore riots or war in Iraq or anything.
Right. Well, now, so we're about out of time here, and I only just realized that I forgot to look at the chat room this whole time.
Oh man,
Jeff.
yeah, you'll see all the
sorry guys, I probably missed some of that, but
I do think the Google Hangouts actually works better than the other unnamed. Yeah, I didn't really like that.
Delay problems or anything.
Yeah, no, this is actually much more fun to talk like in real time or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, I do want to ask you one last question. I'm kind of rolling back the tape here in my mind, but this Freddie Gray video, did you watch it?
Yeah. There's a new version, I guess. Kind of better video came out yesterday.
Yeah, it's difficult to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really something else. I mean, I guess it looks to me like they probably already broke his neck before they picked him up off the ground.
That was
probably
my
a knee to the back of the neck kind of thing. And then maybe he didn't really realize that his neck was broken, necessarily realize how bad he was hurt as they were putting him in. But he seemed like he was already in quite a bit of pain, unable to move at least one of his legs very well and whatever.
And the guy who took the video said something like, oh, they folded him up like origami, which I thought was a very evocative image. And it looked like that to me too.
Yeah. Well, and we didn't see the part where they took him off his feet and put him on the ground in the first place. As far as I know, that video doesn't exist of the entire takedown and what have you. So I don't know if we can, and he may have been further injured in the back of the truck. But you should know this. It's, I think, just breaking right as we were going on, Jeff, that if people know, last night, the Washington Post put out this leaked document or a story based on a leaked document that said, oh, yeah, no, he did it to himself because there was a guy in the back of the paddy wagon with him who was separated by a metal barrier, but who heard him slamming his head against the wall. So, see, he broke his own neck and this and that. Well, first of all, doctors came out and completely refuted that in the media today. But also, just breaking, and people can find this on my Twitter feed, Jesse Walker tweeted it out as well. The local news media has an interview of the guy now who's being quoted. And he is as mad as hell and said all he said was he heard some banging back there, like maybe he had banged his head on the wall. But then he said for them to try to misconstrue that and make it sound like what he was saying, that this guy broke his own neck and that he had done this to himself.
Who was them?
Absolutely crazy.
Who's them? Who is them in this case?
And the cops basically, they took this guy's statement that he heard a banging sound, and then they twisted it all out of proportion to make it try to sound like Freddie Gray had broken his own damn neck. And then they leaked that to the Washington Post. And now this guy is saying, and you can tell he's telling the truth too, because he admits that he's scared that somebody's going to kill him or something, because he's basically being made against his will to kind of rain on the parade of the Justice for Freddie Gray thing. If he's helping the cops call it a suicide, and he's saying, man, you're putting me in danger. There's going to be people pissed off at me. And that's not what I said. And you can tell he's being honest about that they're just totally twisting his words. I mean, and imagine that's really their argument, is that Freddie Gray was fine until they put him in the back of the paddy wagon, at which point he decided to commit suicide by somehow breaking his own damn neck, when there's nothing, even according to them, in the autopsy that says, boy, did he have a lot of lumps on his head or anything like that, right? Like, they don't
disgusting.
even have an argument.
You can't believe anything that the police are saying these days, about anything. I mean, I just presume there's a lot more to say. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about horse stealing. You know, that there were reports and images online where protesters were knocking policemen off horses and riding off on them.
Oh, no way. Really?
Oh, you like that, huh? Oh, you like that, Scott, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, there's no such thing as public property. I don't respect their ownership over those horses whatsoever, man. I say rustle them.
Okay, well, check it out. You can just Google it or something. So yeah, you've got protesters riding around on police horses, and it's pretty funny. Awesome. But somebody found an article written by Murray Rothbard in 1969, in which he discusses this very issue of government-owned property, and whether it's wrong or immoral or contrary to rights to take that property back, ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll never believe the example that he gives.
Police horses?
Horse ownership. Yeah. So this is 1969. So here we are, 2015. Rothbard's 1969 articles comes to life in the streets of Baltimore. You've got protesters riding around on police horses. I'm sure Murray is smiling in heaven.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna go Google that right now.
It's tweeted out. It's some of the funniest things you'll ever. Anyway, we've got a show starting on Liberty.me right now on Bitcoin. I think it's a fulfillment of a contest. We're going to announce a winner of a contest. So go to Liberty.me, check it out. And I can't thank you enough, Scott. It's amazing to be with you. I love doing these shows with you. It's so much fun. I'm happy about our technological switch here. So let's ramp it up.
Agreed.
And let's bump into each other again real soon. All right.
Yep. All right. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Take care, my friend.
Bye.